no negative emotions. In the early 2000s, I started studying deeply the modern spiritual practice of core shamanism. Core shamanism was the work of Michael Harmer and presented in his book, The Way of No Negative Emotions. Okay. This synthesized the indigenous spiritual practices into a practice that could be used and adapted by anyone without regard to their spiritual background. Some people added the concepts from the New Age movement and psychology, and this also brought about a renaissance and reconstruction of some of the dead and or dying spiritual practices. Most of my own practice is a combination of Celtic shamanism and Nordic shamanism. As part of my core shamanic training, I did and continue to do what is called shamanic shadow work. This incorporates traditional shamanic practices with the work of psychologist Carl Jung. For Jung, the shadow was that part of our psyche that holds all those parts of ourselves that we have rejected, suppressed, ignored, or pushed away. Doing shadow work requires us to drop the idea that there are good and bad emotions. Emotions just are. Those that we reject or repress become part of our shadow. So I would have to disagree with Yoda and his fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to the dark side. Fear is fear, an emotion just like any other. Fear, hate, anger, jealousy, sadness, grief, despair, all these are great teachers. They teach us what we truly value. Think about it. Isn't anger a fitting response to injustice? Doesn't that emotion teach us that justice is an important value? We fear loss, but doesn't that fear teach us how much we value the thing we fear losing? Remember that scene in the movie The Empire Strikes Back? The one where Luke enters the dark cave under the tree and confronts Darth Vader only to find his own face under Vader's mask. That is what shadow work looks like from a static or shamanic viewpoint. The shadow often shows up as the enemy, and it is our job to integrate the shadow. An unintegrated or repressed shadow can result in sudden outbursts of emotion, or it can be reflected back at us in our reaction to others. I know in my own shadow work, I have found myself reacting to something or someone else, something that they had done or said, only to, on reflection, realize that the thing I despise in that other was something I've also done or said. Shadow work brings that awareness. Shadow work can be especially difficult for highly sensitive people and those who are empathic. Author R. Trent Rose talks about what he calls dark empathy. This is empathy informed by the shadow. It works with what he calls the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. These are the dark qualities, but there are lessons to learn that can help the empath navigate the world more easily. The empath transmutes narcissism into self-worth. Where the narcissist says, I'm better than you, the dark empath says, I'm not better than you, but I'm not beneath you either. From the shadow of arrogance, the empath learns confidence. The empath can transmute Machiavellianism into strategy. Where the Machiavellian says, I'll use anyone to get what I want, the empath can learn to study people's motives so they don't get used. They learn to watch patterns, not just promises. They learn how not to be manipulated. And from the psychopath, the dark empath learns how to remain calm in chaos. Not by not feeling, but by feeling everything and learning how to emotionally detach. This helps the empath learn to leave when it's time to leave. The dark empath teaches you to use empathy and conscience to anchor yourself so you can care without losing yourself. Trent Rose continues by sharing the dark empath's code and its 6 principles. Number 1, see everything, ignore nothing. Number 2, feel deeply, but don't obey every feeling. Use strategy, not manipulation. Number 4, protect, don't pray. Number 5, walk away clean instead of saying or trying to teach them a lesson. And number 5, never trade your conscience for power. If it costs your soul, it's too expensive. There are many ways to engage the shadow. Keeping a shadow journal is one exercise that I've used on occasion. In it, you write down any negative thoughts or words you find yourself telling yourself. And then after a certain period, usually 6 months or a year, you ritually burn the journal and scatter the ashes. This is not to destroy the shadow. You can never really do that. It is about learning what your shadow holds and letting the fire symbolically purify that into wisdom. Another way to engage shadow, and the one I use most, is engaging the creative imagination during meditation. I've had many sessions where I relax and imagine that my shadow self is a being. I imagine what it looks like. I give it a name. I then sit down and engage it in conversation. I get to know my shadow self. And I stop trying to ignore or eliminate it. If you have trouble with freestyle visualization, there are several YouTube guided visualizations for shadow work. Other techniques for shadow work are mirror work, in which you look at yourself in the mirror and seeing that reflection as your shadow. And by speaking to your reflected image, you can engage the shadow self. Dream work. Remembering and recording your dreams is one of the most direct ways to engage the subconscious and thus the shadow. And then there is movement and breath work. Often the repressed parts of ourself get stuck or held in the body, and movement and breath work can help shift and uncover those hidden traumas. I came to realize that the shadow has been my salvation on many occasions. I have learned to negotiate with it when needed. In my days as a Pentecostal, I saw the shadow as a demon, and I tried to suppress or remove it. I went through several exorcisms, or what the Pentecostals say, deliverance. And after leaving the church, I struggled with what exactly those experiences were about. Shadow work helped me to work that out. I came to realize that the so-called demonic manifestations I experienced were actually some sort of psychological break, and they were a desperate attempt of my shadow to protect me. The shadow can be frightening, and so I must give a bit of warning. Yes, shadow work is an amazing tool for spiritual growth, but you also must be sure you're ready for it. Deep shadow work is not for everyone, but some awareness of the shadow is very important for everyone. The shadow holds the gift behind the so-called negative emotions: fear, anger, envy, etc. To live in fear, of course, is unhealthy, but fear itself is not. Fear warns us when something is threatening. The flight, fight, or freeze response kept humans alive all these millennia. But when we live in the fear response constantly, the stress can be overwhelming. By engaging and embracing the shadow, we can work towards resolving the original traumas that are causing the stress and anxiety. Likewise, anger can be very frightening, whether it is directed toward you or from you. But anger in and of itself is not an evil thing. Anger is an honest and healthy response to injustice or attack. Unfortunately, in our society, and especially in religious communities, anger is sometimes repressed. From my own experience, anger and fear were the main reasons for seeking therapy. I was raised by an abusive father, and that led me to fear not only anger coming from someone else, but my own anger sparked fear that I would get out of control if I let myself feel that emotion. Shadow work taught me to stand against injustice and attack, and to stand up for myself. I have learned to express anger in healthy ways, and having created an accepting, embracing relationship with my shadow, I have learned that even when I express my anger in unacceptable ways, it is not the end of the world. I can engage shadow, thank it for its attempt to protect me, and suggest better ways to do the same thing. Shadow work requires an honest look at the subconscious in order to find and release those parts of ourselves we would rather not admit are there. But because we hide them, they are still there, controlling and manifesting in sometimes unhealthy ways. So, as the old radio drama used to say, who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The shadow knows. Our closing words are Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, no matter the world offers itself to your imagination, calls you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. And now will you join me in singing our closing hymn, number 354, We Laugh, We Cry.